We
We're
got
so the matching outfit. Hey, we finally made this
yeah.
happen.
Dude, we're coordinating on the color schema today. It's amazing.
Let's
Also,
go.
that intro, I'm digging that intro, man. That's like retro 1990s New York City. It's got a vibe to it. It's got a real
Just for
vibe.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're trying to shout out to you guys. I'll just pop this up right now. You guys have a pretty good vibe too. I've always appreciated the visual aesthetic of Stable C. I feel like you guys are continuing to bring this you've always prioritized that sense of design in the products and the way that they feel. Where does that come from? Is that Julie or who's really bringing that muscle here?
Yeah, so it's definitely Julie, who's our chief marketing officer. She's amazing. And then we have a designer that we've been working with for a long time in the fintech space. I'll keep his name confidential, but
He's Tanner's already keeping
One of our
secrets.
favorites.
He's already withholding the juice.
We'll
Okay.
get some scoop. We can keep the
Yeah.
designer top secret.
Yeah.
Whoever it
The
is.
real
is
thing
very
I want to
good.
know from Tanner is where Tanner has a list of events that he goes to in the world of like B2B enterprise that like all the good leads are at, but he doesn't none of here's the sauce is like none of the actual clients that you want to win are showing up to Consensus or Accelerate or these industry insider conferences. All of the leads are at the like extremely boring hotel conferences that like are completely outside of our space. We don't know which ones Tanner is going to, but that's apparently the strategy they're deploying,
That's right.
which sounds like it could be working.
That's
but-
right. Can't give away the playbook and can't give away the ship yet. But I do think I was at Consensus and I was joking with somebody. I was like, if there was like a partnerships person from like Coca-Cola or John Deere that just showed up at Consensus, everybody would be just
They would just
swooping on-
flock.
Yeah, that's right.
The lobby in Indianapolis, the partnerships person at John Deere is chilling with no stablecoin folks all over him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Pretty much every time we do some sort of conversation, I always give a shout out to John Deere and Coca-Cola. They've yet to reach out, so maybe one day somebody from Coca-Cola and John
We can
Deere,
tag them.
they should be a sponsor of Stable Dash.
John Deere would be a perfect sponsor of Stable Dash. Put on a little trucker hat.
Right.
Okay, so Tanner, we had you on a couple weeks ago, and we got cut short a little bit. We were diving into the WisdomTree stuff. That was like fresh off of the announcement of that. Give us the maybe update. Like, how's that been? What are you seeing? It's a couple weeks into this. Any news on this front? Anything we missed last time? Shout out to Julie, who's here on this. Hello, Julie.
Guest star.
Guest star.
She's amazing. Yeah, no, the partnership has been it's great, honestly. We've been off to a great start. The WisdomTree team has been stellar to work with throughout this whole process. And then on the adoption side, we're seeing pretty good adoption for tokenized money markets and just tokenized real world assets in general, mostly from the real economy. And what we at StableC mean by the real economy is companies that aren't in the tech universe necessarily. So companies that have physical
John Deere,
operations around
Coca-Cola.
John Deere. Shout out to John Deere, Coca-Cola, exactly. Shout out to those guys. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of demand for that, and last year was all about stablecoins and still very much is in terms of cross-border payments and the utility on the retail side. And we're seeing more and more adoption on the B2B side for stablecoins in virtue of cross-border payments. But also this year, what has piqued the interest of the market is access to RWAs and access to tokenized digital assets. And I think what's driving a lot of that is, you've got roughly about every politician says that like small businesses are the backbone of the US economy, et cetera, et cetera. But if you actually unpackage that a little bit, there's about $5 trillion that sit in a checking account for businesses in the United States that is not being put to work. And so the question becomes is how can you take Wall Street products and provision them out to Main Street in a way that is safe, a way that it is in accordance with the regulations, to allow some of these businesses to put their capital to work. And what we're seeing at the moment is that companies in the real economy, they have a real pent up demand for whether it be savings products or vehicles, access to capital markets to put their idle cash flow to work. And there's a ton of use cases to dive into that, but we're pretty excited about that opportunity and to continue to see the increased demand for some of these products.
So it's interesting. We actually right before you had Piotr from Stable Watch, who he's building in the USDS, Sky ecosystem and RWAs and the yield and earning and interest that comes from them is like definitely the world that they're coming into. And the idea of building these types of yield bearing products that can then be embedded within a platform like StableC is something that he was talking about. And so how do we bring these two worlds together? You have like issuers and assets that are wrapping and building portfolios and curating certain vaults, and there's a lot of complexity there. How are you thinking about actually unlocking and like bringing access to this group that you're talking about? That is, there's so many deposits, they're sitting idle, they're not earning, they're not productive. How do you actually bring that to life within StableC, and how are you thinking about embedding RWAs and unlocking earning for some of these users right now?
Yeah. So StableC, we build up the application layer. And so what that means is that we own the customer relationship. And so when you use a StableC terminal, it does look like a bank account in some ways. We are definitely not a neobank. We're a treasury management platform. But when you log in, it looks and feels very Web 2y, and that design is intentional because again, if you're the owner, you're third generation owner of like a carpentry company in like Florence, Alabama, you're going to log in and you're going to want to see something that looks familiar to like your bank that you've been using for your entire life. And it's not incumbent upon the user to understand how stablecoin rails work, what are digital assets, how they function, to the same extent that like most business owners aren't sitting around thinking about their payment rails of like ACH, same day ACH, RTP, the clearinghouse, etc. Like it just works. And the providers that sell into those groups of folks, they abstract away that complexity for them. So the way in which you marry those two worlds is you have a lot of great companies out there that are building in the infrastructure space, whether it be DeFi protocols, whether it be in the tokenized RWA space, whether it be in the tokenized securities space, and they're best in class infrastructure providers. And the question is like, how do you build application layers that are trustworthy, that can go and distribute those into the real economy? And so that's where StableC is working with our downstream partners like WisdomTree to provision access to WisdomTree's products. And then we go and we do the education, we do the KYB, we do the setting up of all the wallets and the on ramps and off ramps for our partners in the real economy.
So a question about that, Tanner. The construction business owner in Alabama, the steel truss manufacturer in Pennsylvania, you said the 5 trillion. Is that the number?
Yeah, that's right. Based on our
5
research.
trillion. Yeah, so a big number based on your research, but it's big regardless. That all that idle cash sitting in funds of the backbone of the American economy. When I think about that, I love what you're saying about kind of thinking about the user experience of it feels Web 2, it feels sort of easy to adopt for these folks. But I still would think there's a chasm of adoption to actually use this. Obviously, there's a financial incentive to do so. You start to say, hey, you could really get yield from this. But how do you kind of cross the chasm of trust, of adoption, of whatever preconceived notions people might have with this to actually get that huge amount of the real economy adopting this kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of different ways. There's like channel partnerships, right? There's a lot of go to market work with like our downstream partners to do like lunch and learn sessions. It's also, if you're in Silicon Valley or New York and you're building for the real economy, there's just general basic principle of like you need to go into the real economy in a lot of ways. So just like
You gotta
going
go.
yeah, I mean, and it's an amazing learning process too, right? Like you sit down, you have like lunch and learn sessions with CFOs or CEOs in different cities around the United States, and it's there's a real poetry about it because you get to learn about the local economies, like what pain points that they have. Most of the time it's not even payments related; it's something else. And then you start having conversations around payments and savings, and they take a look at their banks and they're like, hey, our credit unions or community banks don't offer X, Y, and Z today, and we use some third party for cross border payments, or we use some third party to maybe ink out a little bit of like yield, like 2%, but it's real pain. And so you start to really understand their pain points, and then that's what you ultimately go out and build for, is like
Love it.
taking that feedback and Yeah, recycling it into
Hey,
the
you and the presidential candidates are going through middle America on town halls, listening to people.
I love it, man. I'm from a small town north of Nashville, so I grew up in the South, grew up in like the rural areas. So, yeah, I love it.
It's hard
Exactly.
to I mean, I know, Tanner, I know your background and a lot of the team or some of the team coming from Block and Square, something that I just remember the magical moment of that business taking off. And I think there's such an opportunity to try to find what that magic formula really is. I remember being in my fraternity in college, and one of the smartest guys who was a pledge brother of mine, he was obsessed with the Square Reader, and he like ordered one. He's like, "You can just order these for free, and like they're not even charging you; they're just giving these away." And it was like this electricity about that product and what it was able to do. And I think there was something about what they cracked in the early days with the reader that just allowed this sort of proliferation of their tech that created that sense of excitement. And I think that was the first time I heard about Square was, from my pledge brother who didn't even have a business. He just wanted to like mess around with the reader. And what do you think is, we've talked about design, we've talked about like showing up in the right rooms, presenting the product in a way that resonates. What are some of those principles that maybe you've taken from your time at Block, or just you're thinking about creating that sense of proliferation here? Because I think what we've talked about is there's like in group bias on the timeline, or like kind of close, like it feels like we're in this kind of echo chamber. How are you thinking about breaking out of that and really reaching and resonating and hope doing that within the product, like ideally product led growth?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, philosophically, Block did a really great job both at Square and Cash App of taking financial services and for financial service products and then provisioning them out to businesses that were historically too small to get best in class financial services, right? And that's ultimately what they did and where they found their product market fit. And then for us, it's that same both on the payment side. Like if you use a transaction bank at like Goldman or Citi or JP, which are all best in class transaction banks, and the three of us ran like a Fortune 500 company, right? We would essentially, and let's say we had $1 billion in free cash flow. Well, Goldman and Citi and JP, their transaction banking teams are providing us white glove services, and they're taking our free cash flow and they're putting it in futures, forward swaps, derivatives. They have a custom hedging strategy for us. They're putting it in money markets and gold, and like our money is always at work, right? And when we need it, they'll facilitate cross-border payments, no problem, right? And so if you think about what like the best companies in the world get access to is access to capital markets and relatively cheap payments for their treasuries or like supplier payouts around the world. Now, if you're a steel manufacturer in Florence, Alabama, and you make $30 million and you run a 30% gross profit margin, that's pretty good business, right? But what do you have to use if you have a like a credit union that is your bank, or like a state bank? You pretty much have QuickBooks and you have hope. And you're like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. We got some capital and we'll try and move it around accordingly. And so with like the provision of Web3 infrastructure, you can essentially take capital markets products and payments products that were historically relegated to the top 1% of companies, and you can now provision them access and you can provision them out to the real economy. And so like that is our philosophical North Star. And then like what we're finding as like a mechanism for growth and what that product spark is really around digital assets, because a lot of them historically have not had any access to savings vehicles before. And it's not just about saving in idle cash flow. It's about finding every specific, like every business is different. I mean, take, for example, one business where they came to us and they said, we are allocating, I'm gonna make up a number, but we're gonna allocate $1 million to bonuses in Q1, and so in Q4 we're going to sweep $1 million out of our operating capital and just set it aside, and we're gonna hold it for 4 weeks because we know that bonuses are coming out 4 weeks later. That's $1 million that's just sitting in a checking account waiting to go out. Right. So now companies of all sizes that do Q1 bonuses in Q4 can sweep into StableC, make money on a tokenized money market fund. And then when those bonuses need to go out, they can send that bonus out. Right. Like that's one tiny use case. And it sounds relatively trivial until you realize that like, some of the companies that do pay out bonuses, like it's pretty sizable. And if you make, 3.5% on a million over the course of like 6 weeks, it's a fair for chunk of change. And so like that's one. If you think about like if you have a cross-border payment use case, how cross-border payments work today is that if you know that if you're paying a supplier in like Brazil and you know that you're going to need to wire $500,000 to them, you essentially move that 500,000, you escrow it, and you like consolidate it as a liability. You tee it up into some third-party payment platform, and it just sits there and it just waits to go out. So now you've got $500,000 that just sits for 14 days in some sort of like tech platform, and then it sends out to the Brazilian supplier, and you'll lose 70, 80, 90 basis points on that, right? And so now with a platform like StableC or the technologies that Web3 provisions, you can take your liabilities, whether it be supplier payments, Q1 bonuses, etc., put them in a money market fund. And then the moment that you need to utilize that, you go, money market fund, USDC to local fiat, and it all settles within the same day. So it's something that we call pay from yield. But again, it's incremental value. But I think that financial services in general, like you don't really want to disrupt the financial system overnight. Like that is probably not a great thing for society if like the financial system we woke up tomorrow was completely different, right? And so you like how innovation works. It's like the age old saying is like you stand on the shoulders of giants. And what that is like you stand on all the great work of innovation that has come and you make marginal improvements. And that marginal improvement should allow you to capture some sort of market share. And then the market share allows you to grow a business. And like that's how innovation works. It's not these like great quantum leaps. Sometimes there are, like AI is a bit of a quantum leap, but like for the vast majority of companies in Silicon Valley, it is like taking these incremental technological leaps to make products marginally more cost effective, marginally better. And then that's how you drive innovation. Like Robinhood, they just took away the trading fees and then they just got a ton of volume. Like, was that revolutionary? Like, no, like from a technology perspective, no, it wasn't. But was it good business that led them to become a great company? Like, yes, it was.
Super cool. Tanner, we got to cut this short a little bit. It's always great learning from you. I really appreciate you, the way that, especially you prioritize and you see the real business owner, and you continue to put them in the front and center of how you think about winning and what success looks like. It's really refreshing. I think a lot of teams, a lot of builders will. There was actually like a thesis paper I was reading yesterday, a really interesting company called Street Building. I'll send you this after, Tanner. I think you'd find it interesting, but just the ethos around not building for the room that you're in, but building for the market and the opportunity that's out there. I think crypto has had so many like phases of doing that wrong, where we're like kind of creating volume and we're creating products that are like serving ourselves, and they're kind of appearing to be successful or appearing to be like volume is going through the pipes, but it's really like weak. And so thank you for that priority. I'll send you that thesis. I think you'd find it really interesting from Street.app is the name of it. I was talking to Lucas, their founder, yesterday offline. It was a really interesting business model. Zach, any final thoughts or questions from Tanner? I know we gotta wrap here.
I love it, Tanner. You brought the energy. You gave us some insight, and I will catch you at an Alabama catfish restaurant soon. Look forward to it.
All right, yeah.
All right, Tanner.
Good to
We'll
see
have
you.
you back soon, man. Thanks for the time. Gotta find this Street.